Hello and welcome to BlockOne Productions. My name is Soma and I am with Glitch, the Husky. Did you know that VCVRack.com hosts a monthly challenge in their forums? I discovered it last month, but due to unforeseen circumstances I was not able to upload my patch. But this month will be different. I have uploaded my patch and you can watch it in the link in the description. And now here's a little tutorial in case you want to understand it better or build something similar. Let's listen a little bit to the end result so you have some idea of what we will be building. This month challenge was to create something without using any kind of sequencer. This includes anything tagged as a sequencer, so rules are pretty clear. Now, my first idea was to create something more ambient. I wanted to create some drone sound with sprinkles of notes here and there. More like an ear candy without any particular form. But in the end, I decided to go in a different route. I wanted to create something that was musical enough that you may think it uses some kind of sequencer. I also wanted to have it some chiptune vibes. Initially, I started with a clock, and although a clock is not a sequencer by any means, I wanted to try something different. A clock is just a series of square pulses, so in the end I decided to use LLFO by Vogue Audio, a simple but effective LFO with offset, scale and reset. I don't need the V-oct because we will be using only the frequency knob to adjust our tempo. We will be using different clock multiplications and divisions, so I decided to use RGATE by Vogue Audio to multiply and divide our gates. Let's connect the main output from LFO to our different RGATEs. In this case I will be using 4 different times. So 4 RGATEs should be enough, and simply select whether we want to multiply or divide it and select the number. Easy, right? Now, here's the backbone of the whole patch. I decided to use Bernoulli gates to have interesting patterns for our notes and drums. I like to label them. So the first one will be oscillator A plus B, because I want to alternate between those two. The bottom one will be similar, but for the kick drum and the snare, so let's label them accordingly. I will use the same trigger for the kick drum and for bass, so we have oscillator A, B and C, as well as kick and snare. The second Bernoulli gate will be dedicated to the hi-hats, the top part for the open hi-hat and the bottom for the burst, so let's label them. The third Bernoulli gate will also be dedicated to the hi-hat, specifically to the closed hi-hat. I like to have the clock input from our gate to the top part and assign a high probability, and then the output goes to the bottom input with a lower probability. I think this creates a really interesting pattern, especially when we add modulation. And that's it, that's our sequencer. Just a clock multiplied and divided accordingly and some Bernoulli gates to get some patterns out of it. Let's work with our drums first. As always, I will be using Pico Drums, so let's connect it to the kick and start triggers and select our sound. Now the hi-hat, since we're going to be using the normal trigger and the burst trigger, we need to mix them. So I decided to use UMIX. Let's use Reburst by Repelsen with a clock input and a trigger input. For the sound, I like Hi-Hat by Hora, and now connect our closed hi-hat trigger, our open trigger, and our output, as well as the output from Pico Drums, to the mixer. And let's listen to it. That's our drum section. Let's work on our notes. First, we need something that generates notes. I will be using Noise Plethora, an amazing noise module from Pico with so many functions that sometimes I don't even know what to do with all of them. Let's use SNH8, a sample and hold module from ML modules, and let's connect Noise Plethora to two of our inputs and the trigger from our Bernoulli gates to the trigger input in SNH. We now have a CV value that will be turned into a note, and for that I like to use fence by orange line to have it on a specific octave. Let's use 2 for our oscillator A and B, and now we need a scale, and for that, you have probably guessed it, but we need a quantizer. I will be using my favorite combo that I've talked about countless times, ScaleCV and DiatonicCV for chords. Let's select our scale, C# Lydian, and connect it to DiatonicCV and the output from fence to our quantizer. Now we need something to produce our sound. Since I want to create some chiptunes, I will be using modules from the KautenjaDSP collection. They have amazing emulator of famous chips from retro consoles. For our main voice, I will be using Step So, a recreation of the Konami chips for the NES cartridge. I want to connect the first output from our ScaleCV to it, and the gate could go to this amp section. But let's pass it through an ADSR by Bug Audio to have a more interesting envelope. I like to connect it to our 3 inputs, but that's a sound design choice. I will use another UMIX to mix the 3 outputs from Step So and the output to the mixer. For our second voice, I decided to use Mini Boss, a recreation of the Yamaha chip for the Sega Genesis and the Mega Drive. This time I will use the gate directly from Bernoulli Gate and the quantized output from ScaleCV. Finally, the output to our mixer. I want oscillator C to be a bass that follows the kick drum. So let's take one of the outputs from Noise Plethora, pass it through SNH, fence, and DiatonicCV. And then let's use Infinite Stairs, an emulation of the Rico chip using on the NES. I will use 3 of the inputs but not the noise one. Let's use another ADSR to shape our bass and another UMIX to mix our 3 outputs into one. Now I want to have some chords, and since we have DiatonicCV, any chord will be on our scale, no matter how weird. So let's use the outputs from Noise Plethora and SNH to change our chord. I want that every 16 steps we have a new chord, so let's connect our output from our gate to our 4 triggers, and the outputs to chord, type, inversion and voicing in DiatonicCV. I will take the output, split it using a split 8 by Grande, and I like to use saïch by Instro for these kinds of chords. It's an amazing module that by itself could be an entire video, but let's just say that it is a quad oscillator with an amazing attenuverter that works for many different purposes. So let's connect our 4 node to the 4 voices in saïch. And use another ADSR to shape our chord. This time the output from cèis can go to this CV input in saïch because we can select the behavior. In this case I want it to behave as a VCA, the audio output to the mixer, and let's listen to the result as it is. We're almost done. I want to add some effects, so let's add Matrix 81 to select which of our sounds go to Plateau by Valley. I want to have the kick, snare and oscillator A and B, so let's select them in Matrix 81, connect it to Plateau and then to the mixer. I also want to have some delay, so let's use Chronoblob, another Matrix 81 to select which sounds go to the delay. And now I want only oscillator A and B, so let's use Lateralus because I want only certain frequencies to go to our delay. Let's add some modulation using Caudal. The final thing I want to add is compression. I will use Merge by PCV because I need more than 8 channels. Then Comp by Squinky Labs. I would like to use Comp too, but I have a weird issue where only the first 2 channels get compression. Anyway, let's adjust compression values. I like to have soft compression and a clear sound, but if you like a harsher compression with distortion, go for it. Let's use a split and connect every channel to our mixer. Let's organize the patch, add a button to play and some blanks, and that's it. We now have a chiptunes patch with a nice drum beat, 3 voices, chords and effects, all without a sequencer. What do you think? Does it sound like a video game soundtrack? If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and leave a comment. Follow me on social networks and join my Discord.